All right, hello, and whoop, let's see, did I even get this right? Let's see. Yeah, I am unmuted.
You are. Good morning.
Oh, good morning. Welcome to Low-Code Campfire number 34 for Friday, January 21st, 2022. And this one is called All About You. But for the moment, it's all about me. I'm Dale Warner. I'm head of support for Plant an App, hosting this little gathering. This is something that we do every week on Fridays to get together to share techniques, challenges, experiences, and this is for open to anybody. We record all these episodes and we've got, let's see, this is number 34. So we've got 33 great hours of discussion for Plant an App on our YouTube channel. So make sure to sign up, subscribe, and set the alert bell so you can see when these new ones drop. We run a pretty informal agenda. We say hello. We talk about the problems that have been submitted in advance or the questions that come from just what's first on your mind. Sometimes we hear from different departments from within our company as well. So great access, great time to go around the campfire and share. Glad to see everyone here. We have very few guidelines, but we do like it if you use mute when, especially if you've got noise behind you. And you can submit questions and topics in advance. And we're just working down the list of topics today. That's the plan. We've got a lot of topics that were submitted the first of the year. And so we continue to work on them as we go. So hello, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Dale. Good morning, everyone.
Good to see you all here today. Let's see, we have Patrick Anderson from our team working in the background. So Patrick, good to have you here today.
Hey, good morning.
So we start with first call. What's on your mind? Anyone with a burning topic, a burning question that they want to make sure gets included in today's episode?
I think I might have a quick one, if you don't mind. I want to know, is there a way that you can pause between actions in an action stack, like on a button? I've got one that does some JavaScript, and it takes a little bit longer, and the next action proceeds without waiting, and I don't have the result of the JavaScript. So that's the question. Can I pause before running the next action?
I don't have the answer to that. I would have thought that your JavaScript action would fire and that it wouldn't move on until it finished. And you're telling me that it's going on anyway?
It's running, but it's filling another field on the form with content. And then the next action is trying to grab that content, assuming that it's finished in there, and move on and process it. But it's not finding that content there.
So I know in community, you're the first one to suggest, hey, have you added a timer? Have you tried to add some arbitrary time into the mix already?
Well, that is the question though, because I know how to add time to a JavaScript. I can set a pause or a set timeout, but in an action, the next action is not JavaScript. So that's the one I would like it to wait just a little bit.
Yeah.
Are you sure you're filling the model?
Am I sure?
Well, of course you have the screen, and you have the data model in Angular, and your code is looking at the data model in Angular. So you have to fill that one, I guess.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I wouldn't know how to do that. What do you mean?
Yeah, well, I don't either. I struggled with a similar problem, and that's I don't know what I did. I think I did a refresh or something like that to get the data. I circumvented the problem. I couldn't figure it out myself.
Right. I think I get you. You know, I fill a large text box in the JavaScript. That's what it does. It fills a large text box. And then I'm running a refresh after that in JavaScript. I'm not quite sure. It's a dot change. I'm not quite sure that that's fulfilling the goal. Maybe I need a different command. But I think that's what you're talking about.
So since it's going on to the next action, I would, before you would expect the JavaScript still running, next action gets fired, you don't have the data yet.
I don't think it has anything to do with the time it runs. It just I don't think you're filling the right
Yeah.
properties, and maybe somewhere with Angular experience in this core can shed some light on it, because, well, I don't know.
There's one that and Mark, I think it was your question that I posted an answer to this week, having to do with date and time, where we're initializing a date time, and it actually required setting a couple of things. I don't know if you ended up using that solution. I can't remember, but you had to set the date and time in two different ways, one in the library and one in a different notation. We could call it up here and find the answer that I posted to you. But point is that it kind of goes towards, you have to make sure that that you're doing everything that the JavaScript that it's expecting before you move on to the next step. So, for example, if you didn't have the next step, is it populating the data as you would have expected it to?
Yes. Well,
So, for example, if you were to end at the end of the JavaScript, have no more actions after that except perhaps an Ajax, and then have a different button that tries to use the data as you're expecting it, does that work? I mean, it would clearly delineate whether it's a timing issue or a...
No, I don't know the answer to that, Dale. I can tell you that since I'm putting the JavaScript action is putting something in a large text box, I can see the large text box and I can see the content appear. But I don't think that's the same question that you're asking. So I don't know if another action would be aware that it's there.
That would be the kind of thing that I would test in a circumstance like this. And if you wanted to, again, on the community forum, if you want to share some description of what you're doing, I'd be happy to spend some time testing on it, see if I can figure out what's going on with it. And or, the main thing, we like always got to reproduce it, and then we can get somebody to look at it and give us better suggestions. Patrick, have you ever run into anything like that?
No, but I was wondering, does the value have to go into the text box, or could you put it into a contextual token and use the context token on the subsequent action?
I would like to skip the whole text box. That's true. What I'm doing is I'm filling a static text box with a bunch of HTML, and then the user is able to change the HTML that is in the static text box dynamically. They're doing that on the form. They can type something, it'll go into the HTML, but it's being put there with JavaScript. So the static text box is sort of like in a temporary state. It's got new content added by the user. So when I'm grabbing the result of their editing, it's sort of in a temporary state. It's grabbing the temporary new edited HTML, and then it's trying to save that. So I have found that if I use an action to just grab the contents of the static text, it's not grabbing the changes. So instead, I was using JavaScript because if I grab the HTML of a changed static text, it grabs changes. So that is why I'm using that. I'm happy to entertain thoughts on how to get it without using the JavaScript. I'd be glad to show you if that would help. But I don't want to take everybody's time on one thing that takes too long.
I think the next question is yours too. So wherever you want to spend the time, if you're inclined to show it, maybe that'll help.
All right. So here's the thing. Yeah, let me share my screen.
All right.
You see a white screen now?
Announcery.
Good. Okay. So what's going on here is these are, just briefly, these are announcements that people can create and store. So right now I'm going to edit one of them, hitting the edit button. That fills the form below this section. And if I want to change something, I want to change this section here, I can click on it. The editor becomes aware and I can change more content. And notice the fun part is that it hit too many keys, I think. It changes the contents above as you type. When I want to update that, I want to store that, I want to grab the contents of this static text box and then just throw it into a record. What I've noticed is it works better if I fill this box below with JavaScript. It's grabbing the contents of my changes, and if I find status 2.3, it's going to be in there. I don't know where it is at the moment.
So, is it correct that that the text that you're typing is being inserted into this other box, and you want the box above has a standard format? Is that?
Yeah, it's a standard format, but it also includes changes that the user is making live.
Right now, those changes, what you just did didn't reflect up, right? You cleared the box and it didn't clear out the.
Yeah, it's not perfect.
Oh, okay.
On purpose.
Yeah. I guess what I was just trying to suggest an alternate method, in that if the text that you're typing is getting inserted into the content above, you don't have a label there, whatever that box above is,
Preview.
So that they, pardon?
I'm calling it preview.
Okay, so text is getting inserted into preview, and then you're trying to grab preview to store it.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, if you grabbed text during the button and inserted it into preview into the template of preview at that point, even though you've visually done it on screen for them, you could repeat the process during the add or update. Insert all of your text into the original template, not the preview.
Both places then.
Well, I'm just saying you're doing it visually for them, but then repeat it. Start at the template, not the result.
Okay.
So you're getting away from JavaScript altogether. Presumably there's a token inside of, or an insert point inside of the template where all this stuff goes.
No, there's no tokens in there.
Pardon?
There's no tokens in there. It's,
yeah, but somehow it knows how to, whatever methodology you're using to insert it into preview, into the right part of preview, you're taking all of text and putting it into someplace inside of preview, right?
No, really not. It's
Okay.
just throwing it into the HTML in the preview. And the template that I have is just an empty template that'll fill the box. Like I just hit that add template and it just gave me a new empty template up here that I can start typing into. So I
Yep,
think
it was just a suggestion.
okay, very good. Yes, so then the remaining question then is if I want to grab this content with changes and save it, how do I grab it with changes? Unless I fill another box with it with JavaScript and then save it.
Yep. So for my part, all I can say is if you can perhaps we could build a, if you could build a simplified form that illustrates the problem, I would be happy to spend some time on it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's how I feel too. I think I'd have to deeper dive into it to troubleshoot why. I would think that the token for that static text field should be working, but obviously it's not, is what you're telling us, right? That the form token for that static text field, that's not capturing the data correctly, correct?
It's capturing what was in there before the user edited it. It's
Before
not
the user edited. Okay, yeah.
Sounds like
Um,
you're not updating, you're not getting it to update the place the
Yeah.
data model that, which was kind of, I think, what Peter was.
Right, and I was going to say, then that goes back to what Peter was saying, and so I think that we'd have to like deeper dive into it to really troubleshoot it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's where I am too. But I think
Okay.
what you've all said is helpful, and Peter too. I think you hit at the crux of it right there. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. And Mark, while you still have your screen up, you had suggested a topic, and I'm not sure, maybe this is the same one, storage and retrieval task for announcements that I'm working on.
Yeah, this is the same application.
That's the one. Okay, so we got to yours then. Good. All right, if you don't mind, I think, let me double check. Yep, let me take this back. So one of the things that is on my mind, I would like to ask if anybody attended Campfire, excuse me, Cafe on Wednesday, whether there was any thoughts or interest or complete confusion on event-driven architecture. Well, since you're so excited about it and dumbstruck, you get another week of it next week. But I was just curious if you have any feedback. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I wasn't able to see it myself, but I'll be sure to see it before next Friday or next Wednesday.
Yeah, Dale. Hey, this is Matt. Hi, everybody. I saw like the tail end of it. What I saw was quite interesting, but I didn't really see enough of it because I was late to really comment. But I'd be very interested in, knowing more as you go forward next week.
Well, we get into nuts and bolts next week. This week it was more about how to use it when it was already in place. So it was a little bit of a risk trying to show the benefit and explain the benefit before getting into the nuts and bolts. But we're going to do the nuts and bolts, and I'm going to put it into the Campfire website so that in case anybody wants to use it going forward, it'll all be there. But, I thought I was happy that Bogdan assigned that particular topic to me. It was a pretty good. I enjoyed building it and hope it provides value. All right. Any other first call before we move on? Here we go. There were no contributions to the website that I saw in Campfire, so nothing to cover there this week. We've covered Mark's question, so now we're moving on to one from Matt about styling and loading static CSS files. So Matt, if you're inclined, can you expand on your question, and then let's see where we go with the group.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted myself. So yeah, regarding expansion, I was actually hoping that that's what this would be about. But basically where I'm coming from is you've got those couple of capabilities notated in the system, but there's no real explanation as to what they do, how they do it, and so on and so forth. So I was just curious from a topical standpoint, if it made sense for us to dive into it and understand it a little better. Maybe somebody could find it helpful. That was it.
So this is a feature that I haven't used that much. Patrick, do you have experience with this?
Where are we talking about exactly?
Well, I think, let's see if I can do this. Let's get signed in and take a look. This would be like in your actions, like on a form loading CSS files dynamically. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that was the case. You know, I don't know if it was on a knit or exactly, Dale. It's been a bit since I've looked at it. So I will, while you're scurrying along, I'll do the same thing, see if I can help.
I have done things like this before. We added CSS, actually not files, but CSS code in a static text box dynamically when I needed it and when I didn't. Does that apply if it's not a file?
Well, there's a specific function in here where on a, and I'm trying to log in myself to get this up, on a file, excuse me, on a page where you can load a CSS file. And
In the page settings, is that what you're talking about, or are you
you know,
talking?
I'm struggling to remember it again, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I can picture that
Okay.
in the form settings. Or is it, yeah, it's in the events, in the form events, it's a on-page load or something like that.
Load static files.
Load static files, thank you. Yep. So I was just looking for clarification as to what they were, what their intent was, and whether or not, you know, some practical examples of usefulness.
So again, I have never used this feature, but let me talk about some similar experiences. I've had cases where I have edited the, for example, within DNN for the site, you can add some CSS, or within, like if I wanted some JavaScript on a page, I think you'll see me doing it on the video when I did the pusher demonstration, that I'm putting some content, you know, I'm loading it in other ways, but you want some CSS or JavaScript available to you on that page. So this would be, let's take in example of this form, by adding a CSS URL. I don't know why it has an ID, but regardless, if you were to point to this, put a URL in here and say, I want this CSS file loaded when this form loads, the benefit of that over that would say that that all the CSS that's necessary, all the extra CSS that's necessary for that form is going to be loaded with the form. And so then if you reuse the form on another page, you don't have to worry about making sure your CSS is at the site level or at the page level. The CSS for that form is going to be loaded when the form loads.
Well, you can, for instance, think about a graphics library, for instance, a charting library, but you can load here and then you can use it. So you don't have to put that into your skin. So it's, I think it's a useful case. Never done it before, but it's usable.
We have some great examples of this, and I'm like, scurrying over here trying to find one of them that I can that we can share. But yeah, there are some really good examples of pulling in different libraries that that you can use specifically on the page, and that's exactly what this is for.
So I know in some instances I have, maybe others have used this initialization script to load things that you want to get in, or even to use, let's see, there might be other initialization. And I think this is kind of a more formal way to get that stuff onto the page where rather than you having to write a script or write content or put it into an HTML box, you're putting it, you're calling for it explicitly. And so it's a little closer to the developer and not DNN level.
Yeah.
Okay. If you want me to share my screen for a second, there's something actually that's in our product that you can that anybody who's using Plantain app can go and look at and see a really great example of this. So let me just pause for a second here and get the right screen. And are you seeing the SQL console manage form? You are, okay, excellent. So this is the back end of our SQL console that you can access through configuration. But what I've done is it's a page on the site. So if you're logged in as a host user and you go into your page menu and go to configuration, under configuration, there's the SQL console page. And if you edit the settings of the form, and you notice that I'm in the events and I am in the on page load events here, and here we're loading static files, and we're loading external libraries, JavaScript libraries, and an external CSS file. And this is really what drives what's happening in the SQL console. And so this is a really good example of how this is used. Does this help?
Yep, I think it's a great example of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool.
Great.
And yeah, and like I said, anybody who's using Plantain app can go in and look at the SQL console page and see exactly how this is built.
It's funny that you showed that, Patrick, because that's the same exact thing that I found in the Plantain app system that I actually used to extend something. I actually extended it a little bit further than what you guys have here.
Oh, cool.
Because it's hard coded at a version. So what I ended up doing was, right before this load static files action, I actually did an apply token command where I load the version of the CDN that I want to load. So instead of having to edit each one of those, you just edit one token, put in a new version number, and it pulls the appropriate version that you want to update to.
So it makes it easy to update the
right. Instead of having to change that 5.592 in 4, 5, 6, 7 areas, you change it in one spot, and it just loads everything else. But yeah, this is how I actually learned how to use the code mirror in order to make a lot of my large text boxes allow for scripting as opposed to just being a regular text box.
And of course, many of you can probably figure this out pretty quickly, but our magical Radu is the one who's responsible for this.
So just since you've brought this up, and I don't know that I even knew how to jump in on these pages. These pages are, is it correct that they are rebuilt when with each update?
Yes. So when we do updates, and this actually, since we first introduced the SQL console, this page has been updated several times. And when you run an update, this template gets updated, and so then automatically what you're seeing in and then the template gets updated, and then the SQL console page gets updated, so that what you're seeing in when you go to configuration is the updated version of the page. So and granted, this right here is not too pretty that we're seeing right now, but this is not a page that you actually go to. So if I just go back home here and then go to configuration and SQL console, that page is what's being pulled in right here.
So I guess I'm saying, much like many of the other things that we do when you're extending the product, since you showed that, somebody could go in and tinker with that page, just realizing that an update is going to
Right. Yep.
Your,
Yes, that's
nothing
that's an
stopping
excellent
you
point.
from exporting the form and building your own version of SQL console, for example.
Yep.
So, but yeah, great point that we are using low-code to build low-code and where to go to look for it.
And that's a good point, because I have in the past, I've gone in and edited because this is also the same thing. This is a page in the site that you can find under configuration if you navigate to pages. And I've gone and edited it before to put the user ID in the column here before, but now we have actually done it. So now I don't have to do that anymore because it's in the product now. We have user ID being loaded on the users page now, but I've done that before so I have a really easy way where I can go and get a user ID for a user before we actually added it to the page. So that's an example of how you can go and edit those pages and tinker with them a little bit if you want to. But be careful and note what Dale was just saying is that they could be overwritten on an upgrade.
Okay, so now I'm just brainstorming a little bit, but if we were to you say going back with event-driven architecture, if we started, if that became part of our product, we could raise events within our modules that a new user was added, or a user was edited, or a SQL was run, and capture those things. And so any extensions that you might want to do, you might be able to do them without actually modifying our pages. So that would be another case why it might be event-driven architecture makes sense. I'm just enamored with that. Okay. Cool. So good discussion on that. I hope that provided some clarity for you, Matt. And then we had all things GDPR. And I don't know anything about GDPR, not at all. So anyone that has experience with this, please jump in. Define the problem, define the solutions.
We had to deal with it because a lot of our members are work for an association. A lot of our members are from the European Union, so we did have to deal with it. And definitely, I would say a lawyer is a good resource in this, because there's so many little things to consider. Like, we did have some data that was open, but we had to define who was allowed to access that data and have justification for it. And so our reasons were for safety concerns. And then you also have to be able to allow somebody to be deleted from your system. But we have financial requirements where we can't delete everything. And so it's kind of a complex thing. So. In other words, I don't think there's like a cookie cutter, oh, just, plug this in and you're going to be compliant. I think it's a lot more complex than that.
Yeah, as soon as you said you have to get a lawyer involved.
I saw you lower your head and rub and rub. You're like, oh no.
I mean, unless you just want to be 100% compliant and not have, and not really open up data for people to use, I mean, unless you're using it internally, but even then you have some considerations. But we wanted an exception because we had data that needed to be shared among some certain members. And so we had to involve a lawyer in order to make sure that, hey, can we give this data out? But like some of the bad things are just horrible that, don't really serve our members. For example, is we used to publish licenses. When people got a skydiving license, it could be in the magazine and everybody was so excited. And we have to actually make them explicitly opt into that now. And we get more calls being upset that they're not in the magazine than we've ever gotten that, hey, we're publishing PII, personally identifiable data.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Jen, thanks for sharing your experience with that. And I agree. I hate it when you have to get a lawyer, but it's a complex world these days.
From your perspective, Jen, is the areas of ambiguity that you had to have the lawyer help you sort out, are they reasonably well defined, or is that like step one, figuring out the rules?
It is horribly not defined.
Hmm.
The European Union intentionally made it very vague so that they could go after, certain entities. And, our little association, it's not for us, but it's still, vague.
Right.
And then California just implemented a law as well that was very similar. But what we decided was, because we couldn't really identify, just because of, even our members who are just happen to be in Europe, on a trip or something, and if they're using our credentials for access for something, then we have to be compliant. So we just decided we had to do it. We had to do it worldwide because we have such a membership. But if you're only talking about your data is really kind of limited to not European Union or whatever, I think probably like the overarching one is this: have everybody explicitly opt in for sharing data and make it granular, meaning they don't just have one opt-in, but just so that you have control over. I mean, it's a little more complex, but that helps it be flexible. So yes, I want to share my licenses. Yes, I want to share my ratings. Yes, I want to share my email address. Yes, I want to share that. So if you break it out like that, you're probably going to be happier in the long run, but it does take more on the setup.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
In a nutshell, a very complex topic in a nutshell. That's what I would say.
Thank you.
Dale, Jerry Maddox here. I have a little bit of input on this.
Please.
Our clients also are international, and we definitely have a corporate lawyer that keeps us in check on that. And what we had to do was implement a page called the GDPR page that forced them to type in their first and last name and their email address and check off a couple of check boxes that everyone agreed to our terms and policies, which our attorneys wrote up those policies. And it was required that every single person who comes into our system must check off on that before they could get into the website. How we implemented it was through Redirect Toolkit. We use the option in Redirect Toolkit that no matter what, it gets redirected to this page, and it's on no matter what page they land on, which I found horribly inefficient, but it doesn't seem to bother our website. But in Redirect Toolkit, there is an option where you can have, no matter what page you land on, it redirects to this GDPR page, to which there, I must be doing some kind of a check saying, hey, they've already been here, and I route them back to wherever they came from. I hated doing that, but it was several years ago that we had to implement that. And as she elegantly put, it was because we were international that we had to deal with this. And I don't remember all the legal ramifications, but implementing it was what I would hope to gain today is there a better way to have a page that forces the people to check off on these check boxes or whatever your agreement page is without having to use that method, I wonder. But it was, and again, I'm drawing on my memory, but it was imperative that a user could not slip in around the cracks. I couldn't just catch it on a login page or on a landing page of some sort. It had to be that if they navigated to any page and they had not agreed to these terms and conditions, that it had to absolutely fire that page. Once we installed that, all the European legal entities got off our back, and we've ran our business for 5-6 years now without incident. But that's all I've got for you. That's all I know. But I've been down this road, and it's not pretty.
So Jerry, when you were talking about, putting in their first, last, and email, was that they were already part of the system and that was just a way of acknowledging it? Or
yeah, it's kind of like a digital signature, I suppose, and acknowledging that they landed on this page. I build a data system of some sort that says this person has landed on this page. They have clicked these check boxes, and now we're in compliance, at least with that person.
So
And
they were already logged in at that point, and then you just forced them through this process
Yeah.
anyway?
Yep, they were probably, the way I understand it, their first time they log in or the first time they get to our
Yeah.
website internally, that this redirect that we have is going to send them to that page, and they're not going any further until they check off on that. What made it interesting though was how we use redirect toolkit, because if they had bookmarked a page or tried to change the URL and maybe navigate over to another page to bypass something,
Yep.
the redirect toolkit would catch it and route it to that page anyway. And all of our compliance officers was very impressed that we could do that. As a programmer, I hated everything about it. I would strip that GDPR out in a second if I could, but apparently I can't.
Jerry, if you don't mind me asking, I'm just curious. I mean, I know you were saying that you redirect to the GDPR page, and then if they've already been there and filled it out, that they get directed back to the page they originally came from. Wouldn't it be faster potentially to just create, for argument's sake, let's say an action form that checks to see if they've filled out the information for that GDPR? If not, then send them to that GDPR page, and then that
And-
module paste it on every single page, because then
Hey.
you wouldn't have the redirect unless they didn't fill out the info.
Yeah, I have no doubt that there's probably a better way to do it. It's been several years now, but even what you just described, I loathe having to put that module on every page and just do the check.
Yeah.
It just seems so horribly. I mean, we're talking about a website that's in 3 different languages, hundreds of pages per language. It's not glamorous at all. It's just pure industrial grunt work. So
I don't know if you recall, because obviously it's been a long time, but Redirect Toolkit has that checkbox that says apply to all requests, or I can't remember the exact wording because I don't have it in front of me. But is that what you used?
yes, that's what I
Yeah.
use.
Okay. Yeah.
That is what I use.
And I was hoping to load it up here and get a look at it, but that's what I was recalling as well. And then I think there's logic within Redirect Toolkit that you can be conditional, and so I'm not sure that it actually goes to the other page, or that it
Right.
has to go to the other page, but rather it can
Mhm.
apply some logic and say, well, if they haven't been there,
Then redirect them.
then redirect and,
Yeah.
and maybe remember where they came from. So at least, so it does give it a kind of a global application rather than trying to manage as
The
just
good
discussed.
news in hindsight is that no matter horribly inefficient I felt it was, none of our users and our website doesn't seem to be panicking from it at all. Seems to work fine, and website cruises along just fine. And this is with several 100,000 users, and so I'm not complaining now. It's just, as a programmer, as a database guy, as I'm trying to be as efficient as possible, it just felt icky to do it that way. But that's how we had to do it.
Mhm.
So I was hoping to log on today and somebody go, oh yeah, there's this new GDPR action and that DNN sharp, and it does it all for you. You don't have to do anything. But such is my wish on everything, to be honest with you. But there you go. That's all I know. That's all I've got. Now, I do have a partner that's very educated in why we had to do it. If we need to talk legal, or if we need to talk about anything that's over and above the programming side of things, I could bring him on board and give us all the information in the world as to why, when, where, and why you would need to use the GDPR mechanisms at all.
I know, at some point that might be helpful. In my case, that's where some of the work that I'm doing is headed. I'm not there yet. So I was just trying to, for myself at least, get out a little bit ahead of the curve to understand what the issues were and ramifications. So from a parochial perspective, yeah, I might be interested in that at some point, but that's
Well,
just-
I will contact him after this call and re-educate myself as to why we did this. And maybe if this becomes something that is of interest to others, maybe we allocate 10, 15 minutes on one of our Wednesday calls and just do a demonstration on what it's about and how one of the possible ways to implement it, and open that up to the other much smarter people on this call to saying, hey, you should have done it like this, or this is a better way. I'm always looking for that. But the legal part and the reason why, I'm going to play dumb right about now and say, I don't know why we had to do it, but we had to do it, Matthew. We had to do it. There's no
Yeah.
getting out.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Okay.
I think
Thank
the
you.
first two steps would be if you have identifying what you have as personally identifiable information. And then the second one would be what kind of businesses are you doing with European Union or members, or what data you have that has people in the European Union.
Absolutely. That was the core of it, was that we were in Europe and we had personal information being stored about each of these people from Europe. That's what triggered us having to take action on this in the first place. So it was at that point that I'm like, okay, I don't really care why. Just tell me what we have to do programmatically to make us legal so we can continue to do business in the UK. And we satisfied all their needs and have for years.
So Jerry, you forced, regardless of where they were. So like you picked up the IP address and it's a US IP address. You sent them through that process regardless.
Yeah. We didn't pick and choose any particular group of people. We just sent them all there. We just felt it safe just to get everybody to sign off on it. And once they do, they do. And it was pretty simple. All they had to do was key in their name and an email address, which I probably auto-populated those fields to help them out. And then there was 2 check boxes that they had to agree to, the privacy policies and probably terms and conditions. And that privacy policy and terms and condition was not the stock DNN. It was definitely custom written by our attorneys to meet whatever needs for the European group. And they checked off on that, and off we went.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jen.
So just from a, hey, we never touch redirect toolkit standpoint, so I'd open it up and loaded it here. This gives you an idea. You can add a rule and assign it a priority. This is what Patrick mentioned, evaluate for all requests. I don't know whether or not it's enabled, but then there's a ton of different ways that you can match to figure out, and in this case, I just happen to pick, redirect based on a token. So you could have a database token, which, whether that's or a workflow token or something that says, hey, has this user agreed to GDPR? And if it's equal to false or not equal to true, or however you want to express it, then you could redirect to a page. So it does end up being global and not onerous from a management standpoint, other than DNN or the redirect toolkit is doing one extra thing on every hit to the site.
Well, Dale, you've piqued my curiosity, because now I've got to go check my work and see exactly what I did, because everything you just said is deja vu to me. I feel like I've been down this exact road before. So I might even be able to have an answer before this call ends. But I'm going to go take a look real quick and just see how I set up my redirect toolkit setup. Will speak volumes on how efficient or inefficient I'm really being with our system.
Well, and it does, it looks to me like it could be pretty efficient, especially if you flip the cache on for this. If you do it by token and and maybe you're evaluating the user ID or something, but if that's cached, then this whole thing ends up being very, very quick and staying out of the way. It doesn't redirect if it's not completed, if it is completed. So anyway, good discussion. So there's
on your list there, Dale, I noticed there's a JavaScript redirects won't work warning there under evaluate all requests, where you clicked on that checkbox.
Yep, I had. You're doing good to be able to read the fine print today, Jerry. I mean, Jim. I didn't see that
New
at all.
big screen.
I'm sorry, what?
I said a new big screen.
Ah, congratulations. I could enlarge this a little bit. So, yeah, so you're saying if it's I think I read this to say if it's happening at the JavaScript level, if it's not actually going to the server, JavaScript's redirects will not work.
It seemed like that would mean something you can't just drop it in and turn it on, because if you have a button somewhere that works out being JavaScript, a redirect or something, that it could be a problem.
Yep. So I don't know what the limitation of that is, but certainly something worth investigating, making sure that that is not, for this purpose, causing a problem. Okay. So I've invited Radu to come back, and I don't believe he's here today. So that we're going to push this one off until he can spare us some cycles. I didn't give him much time. It was my fault. I haven't set that up yet, but we'll do that. I'm going to try to make that and other things happen. 2 weeks from today, I'm hoping to be out on vacation, so maybe we can get him to fill in on some of that stuff. So Matt gave us a bunch of questions, and this was one of them, the timer clock thing, whether or not it's useful for session timeouts. And again, does Radu have a trick? As far as I could tell on the timer clock, that it's useful only visually. I'm sure there are other ways to whether they involve that clock or just standard JavaScript that you could do for session timeouts. And I don't know that we have a tool that assists with that. I assume we're saying preemptively log somebody out of a system if they've been on there too long.
Yeah, also too, I was thinking about session variables. You know, those have got a time attached to them and then they evaporate. Mm-hmm. So is there a way to, like, I'm thinking about, you know, when you're working on a form, if you're using session variables and somebody walks away to get a coffee, can you kind of warn them when they come back or take action based on the last time that they did something on that page in the system? That's it.
Yeah, and you're saying before they click something, you need to be interactive at the browser level.
Right. You know, like literally like a timer, even on say a quiz. You could, you know, you have a timed quiz, for example. But I was thinking literally about somebody filling in forms where they're, you know, it was multi-page forms, they're relatively complex. And let's say you're using session variables for the forms and so on. And then you know, one of my concerns is, this actually happened to me, where, you know, a team was filling a form out and then they went off and had a discussion and my session variables evaporated during their discussion and they still saw it on the screen, but when they went to hit the submit button, nothing submitted.
Yeah, they lost their work. And
right. Mm-hmm. So that was the kind of context of it.
I too have run into that same thing, and it's interesting. You never know what what the perspective of a user is going to be. I had a multi-step employment application, mm-hmm. and so they would do one step and then they would leave it to the next day and expect it to still be alive. And
right.
So we got to the point where we save all the pages, but in terms of, you know, by the time they get back, they're logged out, they submit something, it doesn't act like they would expect it to because they're not logged in. They log back in. You can make it where they don't lose things, but or at least the full complete pages that they had done. And actually, we've demonstrated some techniques where you can use APIs to save things as they go, so you can make sure that nothing gets lost. But yeah, the session timeouts are kind of a killer. I try and, for production things, you try and have them be longer. But yeah, you could definitely use some form of a JavaScript to count down on them as well. But I don't have that in my pocket.
Matt, Jerry here. I deal with sessions often, and I've not found a glamorous way to answer your question. But I think of one instance where when the submit button is clicked on the form, I do check to see if the session's still alive. And if it's not, then I abort. I do that. It's almost just a regular daily occurrence for me now. Behind a submit button that might possibly have a session variable. I try not to abuse sessions. Even though they're cool as can be, I try not to use them and think and try and stay inside my space. But I think of one instance where there's just one session variable alive, and it kind of dictates the whole flow of everything. And if it dies off, then we have to stop and punt and do it again. And I've not found a real-time way for the browser to check it and just flash up an alert. I hear you.
Yeah.
But I can't help but believe a good JavaScript guy could do that.
Well, that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah,
I'm not.
and neither am I. And I'm a little embarrassed by that. And I'm trying to study some JavaScript just so I can get up to kindergarten level. But one would think, there's a listener out there in Java, and it's just checking the value of this one particular session variable. And when it disappears or goes the wrong way, it throws an alert up on the screen. But I'll leave that to the professionals. But yeah, I don't have a glamorous answer for you, except, if you do have a session variable that makes your whole form mission critical, just check it when you click the submission button before you go on, and that'll keep your users from being too horribly disappointed. I want to back up real quick, Dale. I did check my redirect toolkit.
Yes, sir.
I'm about 4 years ahead of you. I did it exactly like what you explained. I have a redirect toolkit on the GDPR page. I have it checked to evaluate on all processes or all requests. I am requesting based on a token. I have a token that checks whatever it needs to check, and it redirects back to the GDPR page if it needs to. And so I was clever enough to at least do it that efficiently. So that's how mine works, and it works like a charm. So if others need to do that, I would start with that logic right there.
All right, now the challenge is go and make sure that you put some cash on that token.
Yeah, and I probably don't.
And,
I probably do not, because caching scares me too.
I did a low-code feature focus. One of the first things that I did that showed the benefits of caching, and especially if you got a high-volume website, just how amazing, how much the cache does benefit. And even if you, so long as, for example, if the token that you're using has parameters on it, it caches it according to the parameters. So different users will still cause the token to evaluate. But I understand the fear of it, but it is a good and working feature. So. All right, with that, we are at 59 minutes past the hour. I'm going to thank you all for coming. Remind you that we have our afterglow here in a minute if when we turn the recording off. And so anybody wants to hang around for a few minutes and chat with us, we'd be happy to have you stay. But another good session. Thank you all for participating, and we will see you next week.